welcome to our talk on getting started with memoQ templates. This is a particular area of using memoQ that a lot of people kind of stumble into because in the ribbon where you can start a new project, the default, if you just click on the new project icon, is to start a new project using a template. And in order to use the old project wizard, which is the way I've started the majority of my projects, ever since I started using memoQ, before there even was templates, you have to click on this little arrow underneath the new project label in order to get this drop-down menu. And so for local projects, you've got the first two options. New project from template, again, being the default if you simply click the icon. And then the second option that simply says new project uses the old project wizard. And then if you have access to a memoQ server, as I do, you can also create online projects from a template or without. Today, in addition to talking about the templates themselves, I want to talk a little bit about ways that you can organize your access to these templates, because that can also be very helpful once you get a couple of templates that you find you need to access time and again. In this particular screenshot, you see two of several templates that memoQ provides you with the installation. The one says 1 TM and 1 term base per language pair, and the other one is 1 TM per client template. There are some issues with these particular sample templates. We'll take a very, very brief look at one of them just to show you how some people can get in trouble, particularly server users. If you're working at an LSP and you use some of these standard templates or template based on those standard templates, sometimes things can get out of control before you know it and cause problems for translators that work in projects on your server. Some of you may have experienced this as I have. But anyway, we're going to look at how you can, for example, add some of your own templates that you create to that menu, and also how you can manage the items that are displayed in that menu. So you could, for example, remove some of the standard templates that you might not want to use and replace them with your own, or move your own up to the top of the list so that you can access them a little bit more quickly. I find that that can be a very convenient thing to do. And as you begin to create some templates for your own needs, you may want to go this way. At first, we're going to have a look at some of the standard templates in the resource console that memoQ provides. And for local projects, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different standard templates of varying degrees of utility. I find them mostly useful to look at just to see how they were configured. There were a lot of assumptions that were made when these were created that do not necessarily apply to my way of working with memoQ. And you'll have to decide for yourself to what extent they apply to your situation. And for server users, you've also got 5 templates that are provided, which are more or less the same. There's a little bit of difference. There's one that has to do with CMS workflows. If you're a server user who has a client that has a content management system and you want to connect to that. And then there's another one which I found quite interesting. It's actually the bottom one that's shown here, called 1 TM per client template plus file system. It's kind of a mysterious name, but it does something rather interesting that you can also do with local projects as far as making backups of some of your work in case things go wrong. But anyway, let's have a look at memoQ and experience some of these things live. To access the templates and have a look at them, the best way to do that is to go up to the memoQ resource console and go down to the project templates section. Now, at the moment, you see all of the templates that I am using on this particular local installation of memoQ. This isn't my main working machine. To access templates that are on a server, you simply select the respective server and click the little check mark, and then you'll see the server templates listed down below. Okay, there they are. And let's have a quick look at one of the templates that is provided by memoQ. Now, the templates that are provided, you cannot edit them directly. So if I select this one, for example, and I want to have a look at it, the way that you have a look at any of these templates is you select the template in the resource console and you click Edit. Now, if I do that for one of the templates that's provided with the installation, I'm going to get this particular message saying that default resources cannot be edited, and it offers to make a clone, which I already did here earlier when I was having a look at it. So let's go ahead and have a look at one of those templates that people typically fall into when they click the new project icon. Okay, and there are a number of things here that some people find a little bit confusing. I'm going to enlarge this window here. Okay. First off, in the project name, you see a bunch of mysterious things. These are what is known as placeholders. And this is just a series of variables, essentially, that are used to construct the project name. In this default template, the project name will default to the name of the client, okay, which is represented by this placeholder, client in curly brackets, followed by a hyphen, and then the project name, okay, taken from the metadata down here, whatever thing you might happen to enter when the template comes up, and then source language code and target language code. Now, you may want to have a completely different way of naming your projects. And so you might not necessarily be happy with that particular setting and might want to do something yourself. You can edit this, of course, however you like, and either just leave it completely blank so that it will basically be a blank field that you can fill in like you would with the ordinary project wizard. Or you can insert various placeholders that are available from this list, including dates and so forth. So you have a number of options there. But as I say, in this template example that was provided to you, certain choices were already made. Now, most of us, if we are individual translators, tend to work from a single source language or a limited number of source languages. And there are a lot of things that you can do with templates that can only be done if you choose a source language. Now, in my own particular work, I work professionally only from German into English. I've got some personal projects where I use Portuguese as a source language. And so for me, it makes a lot of sense in my templates to pre-configure, say German, for example, as my source language. But again, in this particular template, if you're using the template as it is provided, this is not going to be an option necessary. However, there's a feature that we're going to discover with the templates where you'll realize that this is not necessarily a problem. Okay, but here under translation memories, there is a setting in this template as well as in the equivalent template for online projects, which causes a lot of grief. And there's a similar thing under the term basis, but you notice, okay, once again, they've got a certain format that they've chosen for creating the name of a working translation memory and a master translation memory involving these placeholders once again. You may decide, or you may prefer to work with only a single translation memory for a particular client and use it as both the working and the master. A lot of people do that, in which case this particular configuration does not serve you very well, and you would have to make changes to that. But down here under reference translation memories, this is where you can configure certain resources, in this case, translation memories, that will be added automatically to the project. And again, this is a decision that was made by the people that set up this example. But this particular decision of automatically adding any translation memory which happens to have the same client listed in the metadata can be a source of problems, particularly when you're dealing with online projects from a fairly busy LSP. I have a client that I like very much that I've worked with for a number of years doing legal translation work, and they've always used the memoQ server. But a couple of years ago, I noticed that their project that they sent me was running really, really slow. And usually I had no performance issues with their projects, but this time it was incredibly slow. And I took a look at the resources in the project, and I saw that there was something like 50 translation memories, yes, 50 translation memories attached to the project. And when I looked under term bases, there was also something like 40 or 50 term bases that were attached to this one project. And now I have pretty good bandwidth down here at my office. I've got a nice fiber optic connection, but it was slow. My God, every time I would try to confirm a segment, there would be a delay of up to maybe 30 seconds or so. And I began to look into the problem. I realized that they do a lot of volume with this particular client. So they were creating a lot of projects for this client. And it turned out that the TM and the term base for every single one of these projects were being attached to every new project for the same client. So every time a new project came up, the project, or this new project, would become increasingly burdened by all of the old resources, which they never merged or cleaned up in any way. And so when I do this kind of automated addition of resources, I tend to avoid choosing this automatic addition of a client. Now, usually if I want, I mean, for certain clients, there are standard term bases or TMs that I would want to add, and these can all be specified in a project. But as far as automatically just adding any random number of resources, I tend to choose ones that I list as being part of the same project. If it's an ongoing project at the client that where I keep getting, one job after another, maybe at odd intervals of weeks or months or whatever. But anyway, if this is starting to get a little bit confusing, this is good because I tended to get pretty confused when I would look at some of these templates myself. Let's get even more confused. Let's go down and look at the automated actions, which for me are really one of the big selling points of templates. Now here, for local projects, you've got a limited number of events or so-called triggers, which can cause certain actions to be performed automatically. for example, after a document import, each of the triggers or events which is associated with some kind of an automated action is displayed in bold type in this list. So after a document is imported, this template is configured to automatically pre-translate it. Okay, and you can select which resources are used for pre-translation and so forth. But I don't necessarily want to have pre-translation performed automatically. Project managers that I know at agencies do tend to want that. Some other translators like it. People who work with Trados Studio a lot are accustomed to this sort of thing. But I personally tend not to want that, or I want to pre-translate using different settings that might be particular to the situation of the document I'm working with. So this particular preset in this template is not helpful to me personally. Okay, and if I have to re-import a document, I do often do an X translation and a pre-translation. This would be, for example, if I get a new version in the middle of my work. So this I would tend to keep. But in any case, one of the things that I found when I first started working with templates is that the sheer number of things that are preset in the example templates tended to overwhelm me. And when I began to go in and make changes to adapt these things to be more in line with my needs, I had some difficult times deciding, well, which things do I want for what scenarios and so forth. And so I kept thinking for a lot of years, okay, I can tell that templates are going to be really, really useful. But in order to make any use out of templates, I'm going to have to do a lot of planning of how I'm going to structure it, because I was thinking of templates as being these large baskets of various operations that could be performed or various resources that would be added. And there were really so many decisions that had to be made in order to come up with optimized templates for some of my clients that I kept putting that off, year after year after year. And it wasn't really until I began to look at it a little differently that I realized, we can make use of templates without getting into all of that complexity. And part of what brought me to that realization was some training that I'm doing with a Portuguese translation agency. And when I first sat down to talk to the team of project managers about what they wanted to do, they were telling me about all the work they did with the local courts and all of the resources they wanted to add and various backups that they wanted to do, a lot of different operations. And I took careful notes on everything. And I went out and I created a template that did everything that was on their wish list. And then I was really surprised when it never got used. And the reason it never got used was that the project managers were so accustomed to doing all of these operations manually, and it was taking a lot of time, and they were complaining about it. But when all of a sudden, all of those operations were automated, it scared the crap out of them. And so what we needed to do, and what we finally did in a subsequent training session when they were down here in town with me a couple of weeks ago, was we started off from nothing. In fact, that's what we're going to do now. And we started off with a new template that we created. And this is going to be a template with nothing configured. So let's go ahead and select this one and have a look. Okay, and you can see under the name, there is no pre-configuration for project name. There is nothing pre-configured for project, client, nothing for the languages. There are no live docs corpora that are pre-selected, nothing. No translation memories, no term bases, and so forth. And if you go down to the automated actions, you'll see that there is no bold text anywhere. So there are no automated actions that are pre-configured here. Well, what good is this? I found it was pretty useful to start off in this state and ask, when I was working with a group of project managers, I said to them, okay, now, what kind of things are you finding that you do with most projects that takes a lot of your time that perhaps you would like to automate? And one of the guys who was there said, well, you know, one of the things that takes up a good bit of time for me is just selecting all of the target languages in my projects, which is not necessarily an issue for freelance translators, because most of us tend to work into only one target language at a time. We don't usually have the project manager edition of memoQ that allows you to have multiple target languages set for a particular source language. But for project managers at a translation agency, this is a rather common scenario that you might get a document, say in English, and need to translate it into French and Portuguese and Italian and Spanish. And so his particular wish was to have a template with no source language specified, because his source language that he might get in the document might be Portuguese, it might be English. So he would just kind of leave that open. But he wanted to make sure that it went into certain target languages. So, for example, German, select that there, and Italian, and Polish, and Portuguese, for example. So here we've got these target languages that are selected, and just click OK. So now we have a simple template, which if I were to choose that when I start a new project, would automatically create, if I have the project manager edition of memoQ, which I do happen to have, it would automatically create a project that would have those target languages pre-configured, and it would do nothing else. And in fact, let's have a look at how that works. So I will create a new project from a template. What the heck, I'll go ahead and add a document. Notice it says it's detecting the languages. This is using the natural language processing feature of memoQ to identify the source language automatically. So this project manager, when he expressed his wish for something that he thought it might be nice for a template to do, thought that he would have to then manually configure English or Portuguese or some other language as the source language. But in fact, the template will take care of that and identify the source language, which of course you can change. If I decided that I wanted to use an English variant, for example, I could then select that. Okay. And let's see if okay. It's looking at a different template. So I will select this template that we just configured. Okay, and you notice that it's automatically got the 4 target languages that we selected. And I simply click finish. But I have to give it a project name. Okay, demo 4. So now I've named the project. And here is the project with that particular document, which has been imported for translation in each of the 4 languages. And I could use the drop down here to filter and look at the documents only in a particular language if I want to do that. Now, this does not really reflect what a typical freelance translator is going to be doing, unless, of course, you're working with the project manager edition and you're outsourcing to a couple of colleagues that work with other languages. But a similar application that I found for myself was dealing with Excel files where, well, actually, let me show you what I'm talking about here. This is a very simplified version here, where you've got a source column and a target column. Probably a lot of you have encountered this at some point or another in your work. And does anyone happen to know offhand if you have a file like this and the client tells you, okay, I would like all the translations put in column B, and maybe as in this simple example that you see here, some of that column is already translated. Maybe it's translated, proofread, and approved, or maybe you're supposed to check the stuff or not. But in this particular scenario, in an Excel file, what filter would you choose to do the job? Anybody?
Multilingual.
Exactly. Okay, you get the prize for the day. A lot of people, strangely enough, don't know that. They use the Excel filter, or they copy the content from column A and paste it into column B, which is a bit of a that doesn't really work when you've got content that's already in column B. Works just fine if you don't. And then they'll select a certain range. But the proper filter to use for this is called the multilingual delimited text filter. Now, the name alone might be an indication that a lot of people are not going to be able to find, or they're not going to think, oh, but it says text filter. This is an Excel file. Or even if you know it, like Mr. Zatarnos, you still have to go and manually configure that. Well, I get enough of these things that I thought, well, it would be nice to create a template that would do just that. And so I did that. I went into memoQ and I created a project template. Let me see if I can find it here. Here it is, Excel source plus target. Okay, this one I created as a new template, so with no settings. Let's go ahead and have a look and see what I did here. And this particular aspect of templates that I'm going to show to you is extremely useful for automatically choosing a lot of custom filter configurations. Okay, as you can see, there appears to be no settings for the name and the languages. Okay, so this is a general template that I've got here. I'm not attaching any particular resources, so this is not a client-specific thing. Okay, you look through and, okay, there's also no automated actions that are configured. So what have I done with this? Well, under settings, there's a really really interesting place. It's this little thing that looks like a wrench, or if you're a British English speaker, a spanner, and a screwdriver. And now here, under settings, in the 1, 2, 3, 4th icon, those little crossed tools, there's a number of interesting things here. I mean, you can see you can choose non-translatable lists and all that, but the thing I find most useful here is down at the bottom, filter configurations. And you notice that here, for the path or file name rule, I've specified a pattern, okay, which describes a pattern in the name of the file. Okay, it might be a little bit hard to see in the screen share, but what I have written here is asterisk, period, XLS, asterisk. Now, what that means, asterisk is a wildcard that can be any characters. So before the file extension starts, it can be any file name of any allowed length. And then the period. And then an extension, XLS asterisk. Now, can somebody tell me why I would put an asterisk at the end of this?
Because in that way you can also take these kind Excel sort with macros, for example.
Yes, XLSM, is that?
Yes.
Yeah, or an old one. You know, the
An
old
old one.
format of Excel.
Yes. Yes.
I still see those. I don't know about you, but I have clients who are still sending me
Yes.
doc files.
Yes, yes.
So there might be a particular filter configuration that I create that I want to use with both doc and docx files. So if I want to use a filter configuration for both, and I don't want to make redundant entries, you know, one entry of the same filter for docx and another one for doc, I would simply write doc star. And that would also, like you just said, Marcos, that would cover a Word file for with macros, docm, I think it is. So here, by putting a wildcard at the end of the extension, I'm making it a little bit more flexible. Now, you could also possibly even do something like that. I hadn't thought about that, but you know, we've got all these different weird XLIF formats that are out there, many of which should just be dealt with a generic XLIF filter. And so you could even put in wildcards that would include part of XLIF, like, you know, just XL star F. Probably that would work, you know, or star XL star F would probably catch SDL XLIFs, the XLIF extension for WordFast, memoQ XLIF, and so forth. And so you could create a template that would just kind of automatically recognize and import any kind of weird XLIFs for whatever extensions you've got out there. But anyway, in this particular case, what I did was I created a path or file name rule that would capture any kind of Excel file, the old formats, the new formats, and so forth, and then bring them in with the multilingual delimited text filter. Now, if you can read that little pop-up with the full name that came up, I named that particular filter configuration Excel source plus target DE and EN, simply because I work mostly German to English, and we'll have a look at the configuration in just a minute. But I made a template, in other words, that just had this filter rule and nothing else. Well, what good is that? I'll show you what good it is. You know, here I am sitting at my desk, and all of a sudden I get a client who contacts me and asks me if I would please take on this new project that they've got. And it's one that has an Excel file formatted exactly as we've done. So I go up to my list, and here I have already added this custom template of mine to the list of displayed templates. Okay, I haven't done much of anything else with this on this machine, but I'll go ahead and click that, and it automatically brings up that template. Okay, I'll go ahead and add my document. Okay, and as you can see, that template is already selected here under Project Templates. It's got German and English preset in this particular template. And I'll just click Finish. But here it's bringing up the document import dialog. And here we have a chance to take a look at the details of the configuration. And you'll see why I used the particular filter that I did. Here on the Columns tab for this particular filter, there are a number of settings. And I've noticed that when I'm tired or when I'm in a hurry, I tend to make mistakes in this particular dialog. I will forget to select the source language, for example. In the filter settings, the default source language, every time you select the multilingual delimited text filter, if you don't have a pre-saved configuration like I do here, it'll always say the source language is English. Well, that's fine if your source language is always English, but my source language is never English. You know, it's Portuguese or it's German. So I always have to manually change that. So I thought, well, gee, if I just have German preset, that'll save me a little bit of time, but it will also prevent me from having to do the import over again because I screwed up and forgot to select the right language. And also, usually, my first row contains column names. Well, you have to manually select that, and I forget that too sometimes. So sometimes I will be importing the column names into my project. Now, that's only 2 lines, and it doesn't really harm anything, but it's still a nuisance. And so I pre-configured that in order to save myself trouble. And most of the time when I see these files, the source text is in column A. But if it happens not to be in column A, I can change it at this point. And the translation, the English in my case, is usually to be written in column B. If that's not the case, because there are other columns that contain additional information or whatever, I can make that change here. If there's a comment field or some other column that has context, useful context information, let's say C, for example, had some useful commentary, I could tell it that, okay, this is context, for example, and I would like it to be shown in the preview. So down in the preview pane below the translation grid, I will see the information from column C. Well, this particular example has nothing in column C. So that's actually kind of nonsense in this case, but I have a lot of files where that is the case. But if I need to make some adjustments to the import, I have the opportunity to do that. However, the settings, as I have saved them in this configuration, cover my needs about 70% of the time, and it saves me time. And if for some reason I needed to change the source language, I could do that here, or I could create a different template that used a different filter configuration that used Portuguese or French or something else as the source language. And this template does nothing else. And of course, I can also import other files. So if I used this template and I imported a folder that had Excel files, okay, all the Excel files would be interpreted, in this filter. So if there was 1 or 2 that needed to use the regular Excel filter, I would have to manually change that. But Word files and HTML files and so forth would just come in normally with the filters and would not be at all disturbed by any settings that I had configured in this particular template. So really here, all the template is doing is making sure that for the Excel files, the multilingual delimited text filter is automatically chosen. Now, another simple example, which I'm not going to show you today, is in an upcoming book from our esteemed colleague, Marek Pawelec, who's writing a book on memoQ templates for both individual use and use on servers. And it's probably going to be just as good as his excellent MT book. And Marek has also taken the same approach that I'm now taking, starting off with a simple template that does one thing. And the one thing that you will be introduced to in Marek's book, which I hope you'll all go out and get when it's available, is to create pick lists, drop-down lists, I guess, for the metadata in the projects. Now, I don't know about you, but this has been on my wish list for memoQ since I began using the product some 12 years ago, because I had all of that when I was a Deja Vu user. And so I've wanted to be able to have my short list of however many clients and different subject areas that I work in, where I could simply choose them from a drop-down list. And I thought, oh, the only way I can do that really is to use Language Terminal, which I don't really like using. But no, you can do this in ordinary memoQ projects and configure this for your own list of clients and your own subject areas and working domains and so forth, by using memoQ templates. Now, once you have created a template that does that one simple thing, let's see, yes, that one simple thing that you want to do, you can always add a few more things that you find useful. Add that one particular reference term base that you like to have in every project and so forth. But the point is that by starting off from scratch and building up step by step, you can keep a much better overview of these templates, and you're not dealing with 20 or 30 different options and getting overwhelmed by that. Now let's continue this import that we were doing and see the result. And here we are. Double click the file and open it up. And there it is. And I had specified that content that was already in the target column be imported with edited status. If this were stuff that were already reviewed and approved by the client that I'm not supposed to change, I would be able to change the status, make it confirmed or locked or whatever. The options for that are all in the import filter and can also be configured in the individual case. So that is really all there is to today's session. That's the essence of it. I just wanted to show you guys that it is possible to approach these templates from a different way than I usually see them being taught. And with that simplicity, it will become much easier, I think, to build templates that will meet your specific needs better. Now let's have a quick look at these management options that I was talking about. To get to them, you go to the project ribbon, and down at the bottom on the right-hand side of that little box that has the list of things, there is a little down arrow with a line, or if you click on that, you get the additional options here. And I'm going to go right to Manage Templates. And since I complain about them all the time, I'm simply going to remove those standard templates that are provided with memoQ because I never choose them. And the things I want to have displayed in my personal menu now will be this Excel source plus target thing because I use it all the time. And then this one here, which is this is a specialized template that I created for doing some special trademark files for community trademarks in the European Union. And in fact, there's a YouTube video that I put out recently, which is related to the subject that we're talking about today. And in that YouTube video, I show how to use a memoQ template to create an automated import of WordFast package files, the particular package format that's used by TransPerfect for people who work for them. So if you do jobs for TransPerfect, have a look at this YouTube video, which I'll show you where it is in a minute. And it will show you step by step how to create a filter that will automatically take the package and will extract the WordFast XLIF files, which are an unknown file extension, and automatically bring them into memoQ as if they were just ordinary, normally supported files. See, this is another thing that I find the templates very useful for, is that you can configure these templates so that memoQ will just automatically accept file extensions that it normally wouldn't know what to do with. And this saves a lot of time, because otherwise you have to go through the dialogues and you're told, oh, it's an unknown file type, and you have to go all the way down to, actually, usually when you go to select them in a folder, you don't see anything because it's not a supported file extension. So you have to go all the way to the bottom of the list of supported file extensions, and there's an option that says all files. And that is a real nuisance. And if you're kind of distracted, it's easy to make mistakes there. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and add my little special trademark thing. And okay, and I've got another template that I use for multilingual training courses. Okay, so I'll just click OK there. And now you see my menu is now customized to my particular needs. And you can do this yourself. Once you start creating your own templates, you can add specific templates, to the existing list. Or if you go into the Manage dialog, you can add them as well as remove things that you might not want in that list. Okay, now that's all I wanted to present to you today. We've got some time for questions and answers.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So just as you mentioned in the beginning of the session, I'm one of those users who like to concentrate projects within a project for one client. Mm-hmm. So the perfect thing for me would be to use a template to put to maybe use in a project that already exists, but that's probably not possible.
You know what? It's interesting you bring this up, because this is this is an area I debated on whether or not I should cover or not. If you're familiar with the way that templates are usually taught by people that work for memoQ, they talk about this wrap-up workflow. Mm-hmm. And the logic behind it, I think it's sort of an Eastern European big agency logic, which doesn't necessarily work so well for me as an individual translator, except on those occasions when I'm advising an agency for which this might make sense. But the whole idea of having this disposable working TM, which is supposed to be deleted at the end of a project, and everything is written to the master TM, and that doesn't really work for me. And in fact, this client of mine I mentioned, which got a little bit out of control with their templates, so they started creating projects that had 40 or 50 of each resource attached. They were using templates that would create a new working TM for every bloody project. And then they would never do the actual wrap up. This is why they ended up with
Yeah.
50 TMs that were all being attached. They were afraid to do the wrap up because they didn't know how to confirm that things were really being written to the master TM. They were afraid that they were going to lose something. And so instead, what they did was they made the projects completely unworkable for their translators. And so I would have to spend like 10 minutes just detaching resources. So I have a different concept that I teach, both to individuals and to the agencies that I support. And it's something I call a bucket project. And this probably fits your needs. It certainly fits mine. For example, if you do a lot of work for the courts, and you're in Germany, right, Marcus?
Right.
You're also a court certified translator.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we're kind of in the same situation, and so there may be certain resources that you always want to attach to the projects. Well, why not attach them all to the same bloody project?
Yeah.
Let me show you one of the most useful automation aspects that I have found in memoQ templates. And in fact, I'm just going to call this my backer upper template or whatever. Okay, so I'm going to create a new template. And I'm going to call this backup deleted files. Okay, this is just a quick working name to emphasize the one thing that I find incredibly useful. And you can use this as, oh, whoops, I stuck it on the, well, doesn't matter. I've got it on my server. I wasn't paying attention. But let's go ahead and edit this thing. And I'm going to show you an incredibly useful thing to do under automated actions. You see this document is removed. Okay. The logic for me of a bucket project. Bucket project is a project that is configured with all of the things that I want to use for a particular client or a particular job, where I'm going to be attached. If I'm always creating projects and attaching the same things all the damn time, for me it works just as well to have one project. Mm-hmm. But I may still want to have certain automation. And you notice, by the way, this list of triggers is much longer because this is an online project. Okay, so there's a lot more things I can do, but I can do all the same things I can do in a local project. And this document is removed event also exists for the local project. Well, what do I want to do if a document is removed? Well, there's a couple things I can do. Sometimes I accidentally delete documents after I've been working on them. Have you ever done that? You're like in the middle of a project and you go to delete something you don't want, and whoops, you deleted the wrong damn thing. Well, you could, for example, okay, here it says export MQXLIF on server. Okay, if this is a local one, it'll export to your local file system. Okay, so it's basically the same thing. I'm going to add this here. Now, this is a stupidly named action because look at the defaults here. Okay, it includes the skeleton and preview and the major version history, so it's not exporting an MQX. It's exporting a different bilingual. It's exporting an MQXLZ bilingual. Okay, and there's a certain path name it's following. Okay, there's the similar event for your local project. It's almost the same. Okay, so you can basically, if you delete a file from a project that has been created with this template that I'm creating here, it will automatically save a copy of a full bilingual. And if you realize, oh shit, I didn't mean to delete that, well, you can just re-import that bilingual.
I see. So let me see if I understand. Even if you don't use the template function so often, you can still have more functionality in, as you call, a bucket project. As I have some projects, it's like years in my memoQ, but its behavior is conditioned by this original template that created this bucket.
But see, if you have a template, and if that was an old template, and you've decided, oh, you need newer features, you can export MQXLZ bilinguals from your old project and then just import the folder full of them into a new project that has the additional features you want. So essentially, you're taking the old template or a different template, create an empty project, and then you just import a folder full of the bilinguals that you've exported from your old project. But one of the things that I do automatically in my so-called bucket projects that have my special non-translatables lists, and I've got so many auto translation rules, I have all of that in my legal bucket project. And every time I delete, it does this backup for me, albeit locally, not on the server. And there's another useful thing that you can do. There's one issue that happens time and again. If they say, oh, I want to write this to the master, what they end up doing inevitably, when they're all done, is they go under the TMs and they select the master TM and they make it the working TM. And then they go in and they select all the segments, on the edit ribbon, and then they confirm all the segments, and then it writes all the content to the new TM. And then you know what happens? They forget to switch the TMs back. And so pretty soon they start trashing the master TM, writing a bunch of, preliminary segments to that, which of course will then take priority in pre-translation, and they think, oh no, and then they go switch it back, and chaos ensues. Well, there's a better way. In a bucket project, when I'm completely done with something and I'm ready to, remove it, so I don't end up with 500 files in the project, if this is a client I do a lot of work for, I might go through here and an option here for writing it to confirm. Confirm and update rows. Let's see what that does. Now in this one, confirm and update rows. So my scenario here is I'm done with the document. I've delivered it to the client, to my master TM. So I am only going to be confirming things that are either translator confirmed or maybe confirmed by reviewer 1 or reviewer 2. Choose whichever options are most appropriate to you. So if something is in a preliminary stage when I remove it, I'm not going to write it to my master TM. Or maybe I only want to do things that are reviewer confirmed, because sometimes I switch the roles in my local project and I am my own reviewer. But how, and then I can choose to update this TM, master TM, or whatever. And so now what will happen when I delete a file, it will automatically make a backup of that file in an MQXLZ bilingual. That's the first action that I chose. And then what it will also do before it deletes the file is it will write it to my master TM. Now, if that happens to be the same as the working TM, that's fine. It's already written there. It's not going to harm anything. But if you do work with separate master and working TMs, you do not have to manually switch. And so there's no danger that you're going to forget to switch back to your usual configuration of working and master TMs. Okay. And so here, just that one automation item prevents me from accidentally wiping out and losing some of my work, which I used to do, not often, but it would happen a couple times a year if I was tired. And it makes sure that the stuff gets written to my master TM. That's another one of these, one simple thing templates that you can do.
So this is maybe another way of getting around that the wrap-up phase by project managers.
Exactly.
Which they often forget all the time. So
they forget all the bloody time. And what they would be better off doing would be having a big bucket project. And if it's on a server anyway, you as the translator are only going to see the files that they've assigned to you.
Yeah, certainly.
But when they're done with those files with a configuration like we just saw, they can simply delete the file and it creates an MQXLZ. Oh, but what happens if the client comes in with an update? Oh no, they can't X translate. Well, yes, they can. They take the backup that was created, they re-import it to the project, and then they can, and it has the same version number that it had when it was deleted, and then they can, use re-import and X translate and all that kind of stuff.
Is it possible?
So it gives them all those advantages, but it avoids the disadvantage of having that wrap-up workflow.
But cross-live you mentioned, or how do you call it? This
X-translate?
Yeah,
new versions. Yeah,
this is probably not possible because it's a different file.
Oh,
right?
You can
Right?
no. You can X-translate in different formats. If you start off, let's say you've got a project that starts off as a Word file, and then at some point somebody takes the whole thing and throws it into PowerPoint. I've had this happen actually.
But as far as I'm concerned, the cross translate works X or the cross or whatever works like each segment has a code or something like that. That's how he can he can manage to or I'll try to.
Well, what it does is it uses the previous document.
Yes.
As if it were sitting in Live Docs or as if it were its own. So it'll give you context matches and all that sort of thing. And it just makes sure that the content is coming from the actual document that you were translating, as opposed to
but how
some other TM.
How does memoQ knows that this backup export relates to this original document? That's my question.
Because it is it's the original bilingual copy.
Okay.
It's the MQXLZ bilingual contains all of the original document information, including all the minor versions, every little thing that is, the row history, every little thing is saved in that MQXLZ file.
Okay.
But even if it isn't, you could have, let's say you just saved an RTF bilingual somewhere. You can actually get a workflow where you could take that RTF bilingual, or using a procedure that I've described in some YouTube videos and blog posts, you could even take something you've written to Live Docs and use that as version 1 for an X-translate. So there are ways around that versioning issue.
Yeah.
But sometimes what I do is I delete the thing in the middle of a project, and I think, oh my God, I have lost all my comments. I've lost, all the comments I'm going to send to the client, everything. What do I do now?
Yeah.
And by putting in that automatic backup that I just showed you, I avoid that particular stupidity, which I've committed a couple dozen times in the history of my memoQ use.
I see that this is an online template, no? There's many.
This one happened to be online, but it could. Yeah, you notice it's got a much longer list of.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you happen to work with memoQ Cloud, for example, in group projects, you have a lot of options that you can configure for automation. Some of them may be useful to you, others not so much.
Yeah.
But anyway, as I say, the templates don't have to be as complicated as most people think. That you don't have to do everything in a template. Sometimes just a couple simple, and then think, oh, well, I'd like to have the simple thing in this template with the simple thing in that template. Okay, fine. Clone the template and create a new one that combines both features. And so step by step, you will kind of organically arrive at your own useful template automation for the things that you do. And by customizing the menu that you have here that's displayed, you can have very quick, if I have a long list, these up and down arrows will let me scroll through it. You can very quickly access all of your own custom template configurations, doing just those few little things that you think are useful. You don't need to be, the problem is when you're starting off with those templates that are provided with memoQ, if you're like me, there's a lot of things they're doing that you don't necessarily want them to do. And And what I see with people who just click new project and end up in a template, they end up seeing actions performed that they don't necessarily want. So they're going and undoing work that the template just did, or, and they think that they're locked into this, and they aren't. And I really think that all of us, unless we're already very sophisticated users of this feature, we will get a lot more out of it, and we will progress more quickly to a useful state of things if we just, start off with a clean slate and build step by step with a few simple things that we do all the time. And it's easy to keep an overview of that. Most of the time when I see people trying to teach the templates, they're starting off, assuming that you're going to want to work with one of these things that already does 20 or 30 things.
Yeah.
And what I found as a workflow instructor for some fairly sophisticated project managers with a lot of years of experience is people get confused as hell, even when it's doing everything they want. So it's better off back off, just do a few things and build up to that